Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided. This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy is sponsored by Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with the intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Products include Westlaw, Practical Law, and Firm Central legal practice management software for small law firms. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the Greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is Life Illuminated. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan, acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. A Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology. Look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Alan Miller sitting in the interviewer seat for a change. And we have, fortunately, a woman whose name has become really a household word in this area. Laurie Halverson, who hit the ground running in 2012, won the state representative seat for 51B, increased her margin in 2014. And as we sit here, at the moment, she doesn't know who her opponent is going to be in 2016. So maybe there won't be an opponent. Laurie, welcome back.
Thank you, Alan.
You have been very busy between sessions. And let's talk about campaign finance reform first, because you are the sponsor, author of a bill that's going to be introduced in this session, and let's talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have drafted two bills on campaign finance reform this legislative session. One is a bill that we tried very hard to get heard in the last year of the biennium, and unfortunately we were not able to get it heard and brought to the House floor. But what we're attempting to do with this bill is to shine a light on the dark money. Eagan is a great example of a district that was flooded with mail, flooded with advertising, and a lot of the advertising constituents didn't know how to find out who funded it and where it was coming from, because of a little provision called magic words, where if you don't say certain magic words like vote for or vote against a candidate, even if you're in close proximity to election, those aren't considered campaign ads, and they don't have to disclose where they get their funding from. And we want to shine a light on that and make sure that people understand who is pouring big money into our districts.
And we have a divided legislature. And certainly in the House, the leader is a Republican. Minority leader, of course, is Thiessen, a Democrat. Paul has been here many times. But it becomes difficult to move these forward because the Republican Party seems to, their mantra seems to be, take money wherever we can get it and not disclose.
Well, it's actually even more serious than that. There was a mailing that went out from the House Republican Campaign Committee a few years ago that directed people how they could hide their donations to the House Republican Campaign Committee, and that was by donating to a large nonprofit who would be funding campaigns.
And if it's a nonprofit, it shouldn't be funding campaigns.
And, well, the Supreme Court has deemed otherwise, so we're kind of dealing with a whole new ballgame. And so we have to find a way to make sure that people can find out where this money is pouring into our districts. And in many cases, we know that things are pouring in from outside, not just Eagan, but outside of Minnesota. And when you're trying to represent your community, that really diminishes the voice of the people in the community if somebody else is trying to drive that conversation. And I want the people of this community to drive the conversation about what we want.
Well, you're representing this community, you fight for this community, you're involved in this community, you live in this community, and when I say that, I mean 51B. And it's only fair that 51B should be controlled by the people of 51B. I have some of that scurrilous campaign literature that came in from outside 2 years ago, and I hope that we don't have to see the likes of that again. I hope, for instance, that we're able to change the majority there as long as the mentality of the majority is of that mindset. If in fact they wanted to be impartial about it, if in fact they didn't want to make everything a partisan battle, we could get a lot more done in this state. And look what we've accomplished under the governor. The fact that we have this, when we went in with a huge deficit, we now have a 1.9 billion minimum, perhaps more than that, surplus, and some of the legislation that he has been able to get through, we are in much better shape than we were 4 years ago when you were first beginning your career. So let's continue to move forward.
I completely agree, and it's nice to be, for the first time in well over a decade, to be facing a Minnesota that has a structurally balanced budget, where we are not kind of planning from crisis to crisis. So I really feel like our responsibility as a legislature, Democrats and Republicans, is to plan for the kind of Minnesota that we want, because all we used to be able to do, all the legislature used to be doing, is planning how to dig themselves out of one crisis after another. And because the Democrats got together and put a structurally balanced budget into place, Minnesota can see where we're going, and we don't have to budget from crisis to crisis right now.
One of the things the governor did, he actually managed to raise the taxes on some of the super wealthy, and we heard the cry that everybody's going to move out of Minnesota, they're all going to go away. The fact of the matter is that was not true. It was a superficial raise in taxes, and it's turned around the whole budgetary procedure.
Well, one of the things that was interesting about it, and I have to say, as a Democrat, I actually did not end up supporting that final tax proposal. But what's interesting is currently Democrats and Republicans are really talking about what to do with the surplus, and the whole notion of returning, cutting taxes on the wealthiest is actually not on the table in either tax proposal. And so people on both sides of the aisle clearly see this surplus as a real benefit to Minnesota, and something that we need to move forward on. Because what we really have been doing in the past several years, now that we've have a stronger budget position, is backfilling on things that had been cut to the bone. Education is a great example of that.
Or borrowing from school districts, where then they had to go out and get levies to fill in the deficiencies, which is a terrible way to govern.
It's a terrible way to govern. Anytime that you're using shifts and gimmicks and one-time money, as previous Republican legislatures had done, it really puts us in a precarious situation, because Minnesotans can't plan for the future. If you own a business, you can't plan for the future because our budgets have been so precarious. And now we're in a situation where employers can plan for the future, our schools can plan for the future. We have put more resources on the bottom line. I'm sponsoring a bill this session to put more mental health resources into our schools because we have cut that so dramatically, and our schools really need those resources in place. And that's an issue that really transcends political party. We've got one of the strongest school systems in the state right here in Eagan, and people want to
196,
support it.
absolutely.
And people have seen the results that we get when we support our schools. Our levies are always very, very strongly supported by our citizens, and the state has a role in making sure that we keep our end of the bargain, and taking money away from schools, borrowing that money, was not part of that bargain, and I'm glad that we have stopped that. Now, that's not saying that the other side is not proposing a number of shifts and gimmicks. One of the most insidious ones, I think, is that they have rated a fund for Dakota County waste management. We have some landfill management money that our taxpayers pay specifically to manage waste disposal in Dakota County, and the Republican budget in the last session actually rated that money, took that $8 million that's supposed to be spent on landfill mitigation in Dakota County to put it toward general fund spending, and that's
And we didn't need
taken
it in
directly
general
from our
fund spending.
no. That's taken directly right out of our taxpayers' pockets, and we don't need those kind of shifts and gimmicks in government.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you mentioned something. You voted against the final version of the tax bill.
Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is, you have not always been a straight party line voter. And you have also been able, because of that, to cross the aisle and to negotiate with Republicans, where some of your fellow Democrats haven't been able to do that. So, you know, there might be somebody who says, well, she doesn't stand with the party all the time, but the other side of the coin is she can get a lot accomplished by bringing the other party to the table. And that's pretty much what your career has been in 2 sessions. Might be why you don't have an opponent at this point.
Well, and it's certainly, I really believe strongly, one of the reasons why I have had the pleasure of serving. In my first term, you know, I ran against somebody who was very, very partisan, and I heard over and over from people that they didn't want that. We have a very special community here, and we've got unique amenities, and we have citizens who are really proud of what we've built together based on our community values. And so that's the priority when I'm up at the legislature representing our community. And it has given me opportunities to work across the aisle. Most of the bills I've sponsored have been bipartisan and have bipartisan authorship, including the Homeless Youth Act, where we got more funding for the state to support young people who are finding themselves housing insecure. And we're really investing in the future by investing in the young people.
And that's really investing where investing makes such good sense. Now, we're here, I'm speaking, Sharon and I are here 18 years in Eagan. There has been such a change in Eagan in that period of time. And for instance, we now have the outlet mall. We now, we've seen Northwest Airlines and actually Delta go away, but we're now getting a whole new large shopping center right on Yankee Doodle and I'm trying to think of the
Pilot Knob Road.
Pilot Knob, yeah. That's called a mind blank. A huge shopping center. The Vikings have decided to make this their new home in many respects, with fields, with headquarters, and with some other buildings. We have a proliferation of senior housing. Eagan has taken so many turns for the better that it's no wonder it's considered one of the 5 best small cities in the country to live in. And yes, that is positive in speaking of city government and in speaking of the representation that we have had, not only from Governor Dayton, but in the Senate and in the House.
Yeah, we have a lot to be proud of for sure. And one of the things that the citizens of our community really can count on is that we work very well as a governing team. So making sure that we're working with the county and the city as well as the state to make sure Eagan's voice is being heard is very important. And I really do believe that that's why we're seeing the kind of growth that we're seeing in our community and the economic diversity that we're seeing in our community. And we have things to think about moving forward. You mentioned senior housing. We want to be sure that people who live in our community, who are aging in our community, can stay here if they choose. And so making sure that we are growing our housing stock in that regard is important, as well as making sure young families have a place that they can call home here in Eagan and get what they need, because those young families investing in our community really are going to help us build the next generation of success here in Eagan.
And the young families are moving in because of the reputation of School District 196.
It's a very big driver. Yeah. And they're looking for other amenities as well. They're looking for some transit-oriented design. They're looking for recreational opportunities. They're looking for job opportunities. We're not a bedroom community. A lot of people are putting down roots here because they're working here, they're going to school here, and they're raising their families here, and they want to age in place here as well. So it's really we've got a lifetime of opportunity for our citizens in Eagan.
And we never made a better choice than to choose Eagan.
We feel the same way.
Yeah. And it's interesting because the last time they polled the community, I think over 95% of the people spoke so highly of living in Eagan. That speaks really well of a community.
It really does. It really does. And the things that make Eagan shine, one of the things I love about our community is nobody sits on their laurels. Everybody's looking for ways to work together to make it better. And the city's currently working on a program called Eagan Forward, where there's a large effort on citizen engagement about what the next phase of Eagan is going to look like. And it's not going to be just policymakers deciding that.
They ask
it's
for
grassroots.
volunteers. They ask
and
for
people are involved.
in the community, and people come forward because they want to get involved in the community.
Yeah, and they have something to say, and they've got a place that people will listen. So it's a good thing.
It is a good thing. Now, you want to get dark money out of politics,
Yes, I do.
and that's the campaign finance bill. And we certainly need that. Identify the people and where they're from who are giving the money. What else are you sponsoring this coming session?
This coming session, I'm working on with some of my colleagues in Health and Human Services on reining in healthcare costs. We have a trajectory of healthcare cost growth in this state that is going nowhere but up, and we have to find ways to bend that cost curve. So we took a really close look at what's driving healthcare costs. One of the major drivers, and I don't think it'll surprise anybody who's ever been ill, is pharmaceutical costs. So we're looking at probably 85% of the pharmaceutical market is going to be driven by what we call specialty drugs. Those are the biologic injectables that are very often advertised on television. That can cost anywhere from $1,000 to $100,000 for a treatment.
And of course, we've had some unscrupulous people in the pharmaceutical industry, or maybe the majority of them are unscrupulous. If you recognize that their lobbyists push through a bill where our government can't negotiate costs of drugs, and we've seen the damage that can do.
And that's at the federal level, and because so much of this is governed at the federal level, we have to think really seriously what we can do as a state to help protect our citizens. And one of the things you'll see us propose this session is that if a company has a drug that's going to cost $1,000 a dose or more, they need to provide MDH with a breakdown of their costs in developing that drug, in marketing that drug, in bringing that drug to market, so that we as a state can make decisions about how our state money is being spent on those pharmaceuticals, and individuals can as well. So shining a light makes a difference, and we've really been insulated from those kind of costs, and we at the state legislature want to shine a light. And that's just one piece of the puzzle. I mentioned I'm working on getting more social workers in school, and that's really aimed at driving down healthcare costs, because so often...
And that really is so necessary for kids who are having problems. There was one school, it wasn't around here, I think it may have been in Flint, Michigan, and we can talk about that, the disaster that's going on there. where they had one social worker for about 700 students. You can't exist there. You can't service your children properly there. You can't do the job that you are really ordained to do unless you really pay attention to education. In fact, you have a young son who's in that education system.
I have an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
And
For me to believe that he's 8 already.
I know, it goes fast. It goes fast. But we are hearing more and more from our schools and from our police force as well about what a toll untreated mental health issues take in our school system. And so it really makes sense that if people are presenting early signs of mental health needs in our school system, we want to be sure that schools have the resources to get those kids the health care that they need, the mental health care that they need. So they're not getting kicked out of school, so that we're not utilizing school resources, classroom resources on a kid who needs mental health care. And eventually, who may end up, encountering the criminal justice system because of untreated mental health care. So it's really about being preventative and getting ahead of problems.
How that's happening in other parts of the country also.
Yes. Yeah, it's something. Minnesota is, when it comes to access and affordability, we rank 3rd in the nation for health care. And think about what a huge issue it is for us. And so the rest of the country, it's really something to think about, that nationwide, as our population ages, we've got big problems to get ahead of, and Minnesota is in a place to lead.
Now, this is what is called a short session of the legislature, right? Starts when?
March 8th.
And ends?
May 23rd is
not that anybody is counting.
Midnight,
but,
yes, and that's our constitutional deadline, so we can't meet after midnight, and so there's a lot of work to get done in a short period of time. And
it's really the bonding session they used to call it, didn't they?
They used to, although last session, unfortunately, the House Republicans were unable to come forward with a tax proposal or a transportation proposal. And so those bills are still in committee and still on the table. So in this short session, we could potentially see 3 of the biggest issues come forward to get debated. And I have a lot of concern about cramming that much work into such a short period of time, because it really is hard for the public to keep up with
transportation. So important.
Yes, vital.
Working on our infrastructure. What's the joke? We have 3 weeks of summer during which they do construction and then winter,
Right.
but not quite so. We've had really a break this winter so far anyway. But the fact of the matter is we have to deal with these issues. When Governor Pawlenty, who used to actually sit in the chair that you sit in the legislature,
Yes.
was here years ago as a legislator and then as the governor, I remember how he opposed light rail. Said it would be a boondoggle, we would never make money, couldn't justify the costs. And then I argued at that point, I didn't get to cut the ribbon. He cut the ribbon, and it has proved just to be the opposite in terms of, and now we have the green line, the blue line, and we have now the red line fast bus service to downtown. So there's been
Bus
such
rapid
improvement.
transit in Dakota County is something that's been very successful and has gotten quite a bit of support from the residents of the area, which I've been pleased to see. I mean, our park and rides are full.
They certainly are.
And people are taking advantage of that bus rapid transit, and that is a very smart transit proposal for our county. And I'll tell you, it's not just citizens that are looking for those kinds of options, but our employers as well want people to have, we need reverse commuters. We need people coming down to Dakota County, to Eagan, to work, and they need reliable transportation. And very often transit can be an answer for those employers.
Especially with the outlet mall now, and the new one that's going in on Pilot Knob and Yankee Doodle. And the Vikings right behind that. It's going to get a lot of traffic also.
It's going to bring a lot of new people into our community.
Yes,
It's
it
fun to
certainly
think about.
is. In fact, we're down 2 golf courses, and I'm sorry, I'm not a golfer, but I'm sorry about that. But the other side of the coin is we're up a lot of really nice upper scale homes as a result of that, and bringing in an influx of interesting and really middle class, good people. So
Yep,
that's
giving
a
a
plus.
chance for our families to grow.
Now, we talk about Flint, Michigan briefly, and we only have 3 minutes left, as I'm signaled. What can you say about the disaster that's been visited on the innocent people of Flint, Michigan?
Well, it's heartbreaking, to say the least. What a terrible tragedy for those families and those children that are going to live a life with disability because of irresponsible decisions made by their state leaders, dangerous decisions that were made.
I think criminal decisions, by the way.
think
I
that you're
really
right.
do. I'm waiting to see some criminal allegations, informations, or certainly some district attorney stepping forward and convening a grand jury.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a great example of the fact that leaders have to lead. For some short-term savings that they wanted to realize, they are going to cost the state of Michigan billions of dollars in dealing with the issues that lead poisoning causes, learning disabilities, problems with mental health issues. They have really created a terrible situation for the citizens and a terrible situation for their state government finance. And the fact is we have to be laser focused on good decisions that have short-term and long-term successes.
And we have to hold up to those people who wouldn't distribute money for education, who wouldn't distribute it for health, who wouldn't distribute it for the things that really are the backbone of a community. We have to hold up examples like Flint, unfortunately, to show them that the path that we have chosen is the right one in the state of Minnesota.
Very often the right investments can create cost savings down the road, and that's one of the issues that I'm so fascinated with in healthcare, that we have to make the right investments now so that down the road we are realizing savings through a healthier population, through a better cared for population, and through good healthcare management. And that's just one example of how you just don't get the sick people, the poor people, the old people don't go away just because you're not funding it. We end up shifting those costs somewhere else in our system. So
You have come far in 4 years, in the 6 years that we know you.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to have you here and talk about this. Come back maybe right after the session and I'll see how successful we were in some of the things that we're trying to do to make not only 51B, but the state of Minnesota an even better place, if that is possible. We're speaking with Laurie Halverson, 51B, running for her 3rd term. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
thanks for having me on.